Jay here for Stretford, Paddock, and this is a special Academy review, an extra one this week, where we're going to take a look at some of the youngsters for Manchester United who could play a big part in Ruben Amorim's Manchester United revolution, if you want to call it that. Joining me, as always, for the Academy review is Finn, Academy Scoop. Go and check him out on all your socials. Finn, good to have you back on the channel, as always. Just before we get into it, I'm going to start looking at some of the players that you've picked out.
Yep.
How excited are you about Ruben Amorim coming in, especially at this time with some of these youngsters we've got coming through the ranks?
Yeah, for me it's a really, really exciting appointment. Whenever a new manager is coming in, I don't like the constant, changes of manager, but whenever there is a new one, it's so important to me that there's someone who will use the youth, because there's so much talent in the ranks in Carrington always being produced, and it needs to be capitalised on. I think we've never had a successful United team that doesn't take advantage of the academy, and it looks like Amorim is really, really interested in using the youth at Sporting. He brought through, I think, more than 20 players in his tenure, who all became established first teamers. So he has that pedigree of youth integration. I think it's really exciting, and just generally as a manager, you hear the way that the Sporting players talk about him and big figures in Portuguese football, and they all seem to think that he's one of Europe's most exciting young coaches. So fantastic appointment.
It's good to see. I was at the unveiling of Jose Mourinho many years ago.
Yeah.
And it was funny because he was waiting for the question to be asked about you using the academy, because when people talk to me about United DNA, what is United DNA? I don't think it's a particular style of play. You might argue, wingers or whatever, but I don't think it's, for me, United DNA is that academy scene. You're tapping into it. We've got that record, and we're going back almost 100 years, whatever it is, of always having an academy member in the squad or an academy graduate in the squad. And Jose was asked about it, and he was waiting with his piece of paper that he had. So to answer the question, he said, "Do you know how many youngsters I've brought through into first teams?" 45 was the answer. And then when people did a bit of research, some of those youngsters had been they'd had 3 minutes at the end of a 5-0 win or whatever. It wasn't really something that he was fully on board with. We had Van Gaal, who would use youngsters. You remember Paddy McNair and Tyler Blackett, and
he'd almost used too many.
Yeah, it was a bit erratic, wasn't it? It felt like there wasn't always necessarily a plan. It's like sometimes with Louis Van Gaal, you got the impression he just on the day decided, right, Paddy McNair, you're starting.
I think there's got to be a balance in terms of not giving youngsters a chance if you don't actually think that they can go on to have a career. But I disagree with. I think people talk about Ten Hag's use of youth and said he was quite good at it. But I'd argue there aren't many coaches who wouldn't have brought through Garnacho and Mainu. And there are definitely chances that he could have given to those on the fringes, like Wheatley and Amass, a little bit more for my liking. So I think there's a balance to be found there between, handing those who deserve them a chance and also not going down the Van Gaal route of just giving anyone a chance.
Yeah.
So, and hopefully Amorim can find that balance.
I kind of agree with you there. I think that whilst you can give him credit with the way he brought in Romania in particular, I think you can look at that and give credit, and then also say, for a team that finished 8th, for a team that was struggling, could we not have tapped into some of those younger players a little bit more? Could we not have got some of them involved? Because you know that even just to mix it up a bit, that energy they bring, just to sort of, get things going a little bit. I think you make a really good point there. Go on then, let's start with who's your first player and why do you think he could do some bits for Ruben Amorim?
So we'll start with Bendito Mantato, and that's for a reason, because so in our kind of potential United 11, I think he'd play in that right wing back role. Obviously under Amorim, what we know is he puts a lot of emphasis on the importance of his wing backs in his 3-4-3, and it's a position that United historically have never really utilised that much. Maybe the odd match day where someone will fill in as a wing back, but it's not a position that we've ever really had. And so it'll be an interesting transition to see which players in the existing squad are capable of playing that role. And at Sporting, most recently it's Giovanni Quenda, who is this he's 17 years old, highly rated Portuguese youngster. I think he got called up to the recent Portugal squad, so he's very highly regarded, and he got an assist against City, so he's come through and done really well in that role and kind of shown what Amorim wants out of his wing backs, which is a lot of intensity off the ball, being skillful, being able to maintain that width. And I think it's really important that his wing backs can take it on the inside or the outside to kind of give those options. And I think Mantato fits a lot of those roles and those attributes in the same way that Quenda does. So Mantato typically plays at right wing. for United's under-18s, but he's also played at left back quite frequently in the younger age groups for United, and also for England's youth sides he plays at left back most of the time, which is quite a common pipeline actually for left-footed right wingers. We see people like Gareth Bale and Bukayo Saka, so it happens a lot. So he's already got that experience playing as a full-back, which obviously isn't the exact same, but it's similar, and it would help a potential transition into the first team. Mantato's a player that he's quite slender in terms of his frame, but really strong in challenges, rides contact well, and kind of engages in duels really in a strong way. Bodes well for a potential first team transition, and he's capable of playing those kind of balls into the pockets where the number 10s will play. So Amorim has his wing backs and then his two kind of inside number 10s or inside forwards, and we've seen Quenda being relied on to play those balls either into the pockets or in behind for the striker, and I think that's something that Mantato can do, as well as being able to take it on the outside, run it down the touchline and cut a ball back to those arriving late in the box. So I think in a lot of ways Mantato fits the bill for this role. There's been talk about United potentially being interested in signing Giovanni Quenda, but even if they wanted to, they couldn't until next summer. So I think Mantato offers a really good internal alternative without having to spend a penny on transfers. So I think that's something to consider for sure for that right wing back role.
What about him on a left wing back role? Could he fill that? The only reason I ask that is I think Nusayr Mazraoui is someone who maybe could play on that right wing back role, and I think on the left wing back role we're probably a little bit shorter of options, because Delo you could try there, you could even try Mazraoui there. Sure, if he's fit, Malacia if he's fit, but there's lots of question marks. Could he fill that role if necessary?
I think I could see him playing there. I think the only reason that I put emphasis on him potentially playing on the right is because Amorim historically has played one wrong-footed wing back who tends to be the right-sided player, and then the left wing back tends to be naturally left-footed.
Okay.
So that's why I've gone with him on the right, but I do think that he could do that same role on the left. Like I said, he's played at left back, so it can't be that different. Obviously, maybe a bit more aggressive, playing a little bit higher up the pitch, but I definitely think he could fill in that role. The next player I talk about, though, kind of addresses that problem, and it's Harry Amass.
You're one step ahead of me.
I am. I've thought it all through.
You have.
Harry Amass is another for that other wing back role, because I think they are two of the most important positions for Amorim on the pitch. They kind of dictate a lot of how the team plays, and he puts a lot of emphasis on attacking through those wide areas and maintaining the width to stretch play and create spaces in the middle for those number 10s to receive the ball. A lot of fans have been shouting for him to get a chance. Maybe some people think that he hasn't been given the minutes he deserves, and I think Amorim's arrival could accelerate that process of him getting his chance in the first team. There have been concerns over his physicality and defensive prowess, but I think playing as a wing back in a 3-4-3 maybe reduces a bit of that defensive burden, because you've got your left centre back kind of covering, defending those wide areas and defending the channels. So I think it's almost a perfect opportunity for him to make that step up. He's shown that he's capable of retaining possession close to the byline on the wing. He's aggressive, likes playing in the final third, and he can problem solve quite well. That's what I like about Harry Amass is in the tight spaces, when it kind of becomes a rondo situation on the wing, he's really good at getting out of those tricky situations and finding a solution. So I think Amorim would really like that in him. And it's true that he's got a way to go in terms of his physical development and defensive aptitude, but definitely someone that I'd consider experimenting for the left wing back role at some point down the line, hopefully.
We mentioned Harry Amass on the video we did the other day on Off the Bar, because Joe was sort of suggesting maybe you could use Anthony there, and me and Steve were like, look, we'd rather see Harry Amass being given opportunity there. We spoke to him, Steve spoke to him on pre-season, he spoke to him off camera for a few games, then on camera. Very, very mature young lad, level-headed, self-critical at one point, said he didn't have his best game after one of the games. Next game he improved. I like the way he plays, aggressive on the front foot, links up well with Marcus Rashford during pre-season, and you mentioned there about his ability to get himself out of a pickle when he's in one. Decision making very good for a young lad as well.
Definitely.
Which is, sometimes when you look at these youngsters, every youngster that plays for United is brilliant at football, right? I think that's a given.
Yeah.
You don't get to that level if you're not amazing, but it's, have they got the physicality to make the step up? What's the decision making like? Are they mature enough?
Yeah.
Those are the questions sometimes you have to ask yourself with players who, I've seen brilliant players for the academy not make it because they're lacking some of those things. He seems to have a lot of those traits.
Definitely.
He's very mature, his decision making is good. Physically, he seems to handle himself quite well. I was a little bit surprised that he didn't get a bit of a nod under Rude. I thought Rude might,
that
like,
did surprise me.
Like Palk or someone, he might have gone, look, we can give this kid a chance. And usually as a caretaker, you want to do something like that, don't you? Just sort of,
if you give a player a debut who goes on to have a career at the club, you can say that was me.
That's part of your legacy.
Yeah.
And I think we had the fixtures, to do that.
Yeah.
Leicester in the Carabao and Palk in the Europa. But
I think Leicester in the Premier League, I think we had 2 keepers on the bench. It always confuses me that because so rarely you're going to be put in a position where you actually call upon your substitute keeper, let alone a third.
I've never seen that in all my years watching football. I've never seen it at United where we've needed a third keeper.
I think it happened under Ten Hag. It happened under Ten Hag at Ajax, and some people have joked that that's why he always had 2 keepers on the bench. But for me, it's silly, and it's a spot that an academy player could fill in, even if they're not going to get minutes. It's valuable experience to be in and around that match day, kind of those kind of scenarios. So yeah, I would have hoped that he'd get some minutes under Rude, but hopefully with Amorim coming in, we see that happen.
There's a story doing the rounds. Yep. I say story because it may as well be a fucking fairy tale of Aston Villa being interested in Harry Amass. Can you see anything happening there? I think I know your answer, but I'll ask you now.
I don't. I haven't heard anything to do
Not
with
because
that.
you don't read comic books like I do, Finn, because that's where that story belongs.
That's where they come from.
Because it's utter garbage. I don't even know which newspaper or outlet was doing it, but I saw it.
Sounds like clutching at straws.
Yeah, and it's not going to happen, so let's just forget it. Sorry, I bothered you, wasted time asking you.
No, don't waste my time.
Who's next on your list?
I think we'll look at the left centre back position, and I've got 2 players that could potentially do that role.
Sounds good.
So they're 2 players that have performed really well for the under-18s this season and garnered quite a lot of attention. It's Godwill Kukonki and Dan Armer, the 2 giant centre-backs for their age.
How tall are these lads?
Well, to be fair, apparently Kukonki isn't as tall as I thought.
Right.
I said he was 6'5" because that's what someone very close to the club and the setup told me. Apparently more like 6'3".
Oh.
Still massive.
And how old is he?
16. And Dan Armer, I'm pretty sure he is 6'4". So,
and is he another 16-year-old?
Yes. Or recently turned 17. But
6'4". Do you know what? I hope my son's not that height when he's that old. No authority in my house. When you look at these young players, obviously centre back or left centre back, whatever, a lot of pressure with that. It's a difficult position to come into. It's very rare, if ever, you will see a young centre-back come into the Manchester United team. I think I mentioned Paddy McNair earlier, who was one of the few that came into the first team. Didn't stay in the first team, but I think you saw Wes Brown getting minutes, but again, I think that was at right back when he was a teenager. Almost unheard of for a player that young to come into such a difficult position, because if you make a mistake, it's like that can be. How far away do you think they are from being ready to have an impact in the first team?
You make a good point that it is very rare to see that first team transition. I mean, we saw Gerard Piqué not really establish himself as a centre-back for United, and then went on to be one of Spain's best ever centre-backs with a fantastic career at Barcelona. So there's a lot of patience that you have to have with young centre-backs coming through. I think they're more likely to be loaned out than maybe an attacking player who can manage that transition a little bit more seamlessly, because they're not as much of a risk in terms of if a centre-back gives away the ball in a dangerous area. I think, was it Camboala against...
was it Bournemouth, I want to say?
Possibly Bournemouth, yeah. And he didn't really find his groove again after that, so it can
and he
really
was stitched up a bit that day as well, wasn't it?
Definitely,
I think some of his teammates didn't exactly help him.
Yeah, so a lot of patience that we've got to have with them. But the way I see it with these 2 is, if United don't get a first team centre-back out of just one of them, out of the 2, I think it would be a shame. I think that's the kind of potential we're looking at.
Yeah.
They're quite different in nature. I think Armer's more of a kind of natural ball-playing centre-back, maybe a bit like Maguire. in terms of those positive ball playing attributes. And not to say that he's poor defensively, but it's not necessarily where he shines, and he's not necessarily the quickest of defenders. And then Kukonki's kind of the flip side of that, where he's not a bad ball player by any means, but he really shines defensively in terms of his ground coverage, his pace, like recovery pace, and his strength in duels and that kind of thing. So you've got two quite different profiles, both left-footed, both experienced in playing in a few different positions. Kukonki's actually played a lot at left back, so he's experienced defending wide in the channels and stuff. But yeah, I think out of the two of them, there's a real chance that United potentially have, at the very least, a squad player in a few years that can put a shift in at centre back. We've seen in Amorim's system at Sporting, a lot of the progressive onus is placed on his wide centre backs. So at left centre back, it's usually Inacio, who's actually been linked to United quite a lot.
Sporting must hate us, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, the relationship goes back a long time, doesn't it? And they've never failed us.
No, they haven't. I think they've got a 100% success rate, and it was like Nani, Bruno, and some kid called Cristiano or something. I can't remember.
Never heard of him.
Yeah,
before my time, I think. Yeah, and I think Martinez profiles quite similarly to Inacio, but there have been question marks around his performance levels kind of since that metatarsal injury. I think he's been solid this season. I think he's been respectable in terms of his performances, but United continue to be linked with Jared Branthwaite and other left centre backs, so I think there's definitely an opportunity down the line for Armer or Kukonki to maybe find a position on the bench and maybe get some minutes at some point. We've seen Armer training with the first team recently, and in one of the videos of Amorim arriving at Carrington, I think he shakes Armer's hand and introduces himself to him. So it would be interesting to see if they're brought into the squad at some point, but of course it is difficult, like we said, for centre backs to make that jump, so time will tell, but it's something to keep an eye on, I feel.
I'd rather see that, what you're talking about. We did a video the other day, and I still rate Martinez, and I'm not saying you don't, but I understand your point about since his injury, has he got back to his best? Maybe not, but I still think he can get there, and I think if he does, the best thing United could do is have an understudy, have someone like that who is quality, maybe a bit more long term. You've not gone out and spent 60-70 million on a Jared Branthwaite necessarily, because I don't think you need that. I think someone like an Armer or Kukonki coming in would be ideal, so I'd be all for that if Manchester United could make that work, because it could be in a sort of ideal scenario here where you've got the likes of Delit, you've got Euro, you've got Martinez, and then you've got these youngsters who are coming through as well. That'd be perfect.
I mean, in fairness, Euro is only a couple years older than
that's him. A great point. That's so fair. Yeah, don't it? That's insane. Because I remember when you mentioned there about Gerard Piqué. United, we used to have just the old cliche embarrassment at riches about when we had Rio and Vidic, and then you had Johnny Evans. I think we loaned him out, and then you had Piqué, who barely got a look in, and we were happy for him to go back to Barcelona. He wasn't even. He was like fourth or fifth choice, I think, at the time.
And then he turned out to be a decent player.
Yeah, he did okay, didn't he? So it'd be great to have those options again. Who's next on your list?
I think we'll talk about Shea Lacey. A favourite of ours. I think the big concern with him in the last year or so has been injuries. He's struggled a lot with a few kind of recurring knocks, which is never nice to see, but he's been back playing again recently, and hopefully we see him kick on and kind of continue. But I think for that right side number 10 kind of inside forward role, I think he fits it really well. United fans, I've seen a lot of people suggesting that Ahmad will start there under Amorim, which is something I'd love to see. I'm a big fan of Ahmad myself, and I think definitely upon his arrival, I think that's who I'd start in that number 10 role. For me, in many ways, Lacey profiles quite similarly in terms of the creative aspects of his game, his quality receiving the ball in tight spaces and dribbling and fashioning a chance or a shot for himself. We've seen under Amorim at Sporting, it's usually Francisco Trincao, I think it is, that plays in that role, and he links up quite well with Quenda on that right side. Usually Quenda will hold the width on the right, and Trincao can make those runs ahead of him, and Quenda can play the balls in behind. I think it's actually a dynamic that we've seen for Adam Lawrence's under-18s, where Mantato will be on the right-hand side. Sometimes Shea Lacey, who's been playing as a 10, and we'll see him run ahead of Mantato, and Mantato can play him in. And they've worked up a really good relationship with each other, playing together over the years and stuff. So for me, Lacey would be a great fit for that right side number 10 role. He's not necessarily an elite athlete. He's not the quickest or the strongest. But in terms of his playmaking ability and his kind of creative mind, I don't think I've seen many better at his age. And so for me, if Ahmad's going to be given a chance in that role, there's no reason why Lacey can't later down the line, as we see him hopefully transition into the first team. And there's a reason that there is so much excitement around him, because he is a player that gets you off your seat when you're watching him. He can make things happen out of nowhere, and he's got that intelligence and kind of creative mind on the ball that not all players have. Those passes that you wouldn't even think about making, that he can somehow find. I think he's another player that Amorim would look at and be a big fan of, and be inclined to bring him in and give him a chance. So we'll have to see what happens again, but definitely keep an eye on that one.
Yeah, definitely. What I like about Shea Lacey, you mentioned there about his intelligence, about his decision making, because you can get youngsters who physically might be just rapid and they're a lot bigger or quicker than the players around them, and that gets them out of jail a little bit. Then they step up a level, and they've not quite got that physicality because they're playing against obviously bigger players or whatever. With him, it's like he's almost old beyond his years, isn't he? I know I missed the cliche today, but that intelligence that you mentioned there, I hope he has a run without injury. I hate to see any young player get injured, but when they've had these injuries and it's like keeps happening to them, you do worry, don't you, that is it going to sort of just hinder them a little bit? Because these are the years where they need to be playing regularly, they need to be getting that football, that regular football, and making that the next step up.
What I hope is that it's something to do with him growing. Yeah. Because some players do have, during that kind of age, around 15 to 17, they will spend a year out where they just keep picking up these knocks. And it can be symptomatic of just their body growing and adapting.
A lot of them suffer with like Oscar Slatter's disease and things like that, don't they? Where, I think Danny Welbeck had it, my brother had it. It's like where you're going that quick and you're playing that much football. It can affect you sort of your joints, think it is. But
so fingers crossed it's something like that.
It can be something. It can be
hopefully
a common
goes away with
trait
time.
That young players suffer with. But certainly the talent is there.
Talent wise, like I've said it many times before, if it doesn't work out for Lacey at United, it's nothing to do with talent, because he's got it in abundance.
Looking forward to seeing Shea Lacey, seeing more of him. He is one of those players that a lot of people don't watch loads of the academy and don't sort of know a lot about the academy. And I put myself in that bracket, but Shea Lacey is a name that everyone knows about.
Just the clips alone that come out on social media.
We want to see more of this kid, and long may it continue. Any more?
Last but not least, got to talk about Chido Obi-Martin.
I wondered if you were going to try and be like, a bit not sneaky, but
gonna try to be different.
Do you know what? I'm past all that shit, man. That's old news now. We're gonna talk about someone else, but I'm glad you did.
You have to include.
You talk about someone that everyone is rapping about, and it's this guy. Since his arrival, he's been the talk of a lot of Manchester United fans, hasn't he?
He's hit the ground running in the way that many fans expected him to, and kind of just kept that goal scoring form going that he had from his Arsenal days. Obviously United have quite a wealth of striker options already, and quite young ones, to be fair, in Højlund and Xerxes. I think a lot of assumptions have already been made about who Amorim's going to like. Obviously you can never really know until he actually comes in and starts playing his football and implementing his philosophy, but a lot of people have already likened Højlund to Gyökeres in the way that they're both very fast, powerful strikers who, they excel when they've got space to run into. And so for that reason, I think a lot of people are excited about the prospect of Rasmus Højlund developing under Amorim. But there are definitely concerns in terms of some people have criticised Højlund for the way that he engages in duels. He's always backing into defenders.
We've mentioned it on the channel this week, funnily enough, Finn, because I think you saw a lot of it against Leicester. And I'm not having a go at Højlund. He's
I love Rasmus, to be fair.
Yeah, but I don't want to see him doing that. And I think United needs to find a way of getting the best out of him, because constantly hoofing the ball up to him and him wrestling with his centre back, it's a waste of time.
And it's weird because earlier in the season, I think he had a few really good performances, and I think he mentioned in the media that he's aware of this perception that he wrestles with defenders, and he said himself that he's trying to stop doing it. So it seemed like he turned a corner in that sense. But like you said, against Leicester, he was doing it all game.
Yeah.
And it's something that, like you said, it's a waste of time. It doesn't achieve anything for him.
There's no one's getting, there was, from what I saw and what I've seen, it's not like he's necessarily linking up the play or bringing in some of his teammates and holding it up. It's just, half the time it just seems like
he can go missing a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not a coach, but it seems obvious that when receiving the ball, if he just takes a step forward, be a bit more proactive when receiving the ball, because he's very static. Yeah. He'll just hold a defender off and wait for the ball to come to him. To me, the obvious solution is just being a bit proactive, stepping forward, and I think he could bring his teammates into play a lot more if he just kind of moved it.
I'd love to see. We were talking about this on that Off the Bar show the other day, and Joe was making a case for him to shine under Amorim.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I was a bit 50-50. I'm like, I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm not positive. I kind of veered towards, I think he will. Yeah. But there's still a little bit of doubt there for me. And I'd love to see him.
I'm very much in the supporters club of Højlund. I do think, despite those kind of weaknesses, I do think he's got a lot going for him, just in terms of the pace and power. He's shown that he can be a really clinical finisher when the chances come to him.
16 goals, by the way.
It's not bad for his age.
It's not bad for his age in the first season, and especially after he had that horrendous run in the Premier League where he didn't score for about 15 games, whatever it was. So to end the season on 16 goals in all competitions, you can't ignore that. We've had much more experienced players at Manchester United who've got a lot fewer goals than that during the season. So
Gyökeres was playing in the Championship until 24-25. So in terms of development, I think we get ahead of ourselves and forget, especially really with young strikers. Like he's what is he, 21, Højlund?
What was that? Yeah, like what was Harry Kane doing? He's 21. What was
Norwich?
Exactly. Yeah, like Jamie Vardy, I think, was working on a building site.
Yeah, so I think there is plenty of time, and Højlund is going to be playing for the right manager in terms of development, but the door is open for Chido Obi-Martin to establish himself as well.
How far off the first team do you think he could be? Chido Obi-Martin. Let's say I'm not, trying to wish ill luck on Rasmus Højlund or whatever, or poor form, but let's say it's just not happening for Højlund to the levels that we hope it will be. Ditto Xerxes, and the manager's like, I need to buy someone, I ain't got the money yet, or I need to look at some other options. How far off do you think Chido Obi-Martin could be?
Yeah, honestly, I think I've said before he could get a chance this season.
Right.
Like you said, if Amorim looks at Højlund and Xerxes and they're not quite doing what he's after, I don't think Chido Obi-Martin is that far off it, to be honest. Especially physically, he's huge and very fast and very powerful, so that I think he'd manage that physical transition quite well, and he's a top finisher. He's so clinical in front of goal. He's good running into space. Like Amorim's system, it creates so much space in behind, and it's why Gyökeres was so effective. Because it suits his game, being able to run into the spaces in behind.
He's youngster.
And I think Chido's the same in terms of he will just eat up that space, and if you give him the chance, he will just demolish you on the counter attack. So I think he has a lot of traits that Amorim will be a fan of, and I don't think it could be too long if Højlund and Xerxes don't step up big time in the short term. I think we could see him in the squad, Chido Obi-Martin, that is quite soon.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah,
Finn, I always enjoy chatting to you.
Absolutely.
Great, you're really impressive, the amount of research you do as well. Not just on Manchester United team, but obviously you've massively done your homework on Sporting, the system that Amorim plays, the players that have shone under him. You really have done a great job there with a great breadth of knowledge, and it's been really fascinating to hear it. And you've done that thing that annoys me of getting me excited and hopeful. I don't like hope. It's the hope that kills you. I'd rather be miserable and pessimistic. Make sure you go and check Finn out on Academy Scoop. He's always on the channel. He does the Academy Review. He's always on the socials as well, and he's always at the game. He covers the matches, so make sure you follow him on your socials. You know where to find me as well. That's been Finn. I've been Jay. This has been an Academy Review special, looking at the players that could shine under Ruben Amorim. Thanks for watching.